Right, hello everyone, Jack the Jobber here. Welcome to the AEW Double or Nothing 2026 review. I think there are two major takeaways here. First of all, it was a great show, in my opinion. A really, really strong pay-per-view, lots of great matches. I think the most telling sign of that is that a lot of people would probably disagree on what match of the night was because there were so many different candidates. AEW looked like they were kind of knocking it out of the park for this one. And then right at the end, seemingly broke one of wrestling's cardinal booking rules. That rule being, you can't give the fans the possibility of something they really, really want to see, a stipulation that they desperately want to see fulfilled, and then not follow through on it. But this is maybe a little bit different from those typical kind of notorious examples we might all think of throughout the years. And that's because I still can't work out how much I like or dislike this finish. But the thing that kind of drags it into debatable territory, apart from the quality of the main event and the quality of the show overall, but the other kind of saving grace is that instead of telling one story and giving the fans that ultimate moment of satisfaction, they were at least telling a very different story, but still a very deliberate and quite effective one. I guess we should start by talking about that main event, MJF staking his hair against Darby Allin in an attempt to win back the AEW World Championship. Now, all the way through the match, I was thinking, oh, the tone of this is not what I expected it to be. And that tone was kind of set by Darby's really scary bump off that dive early on, landing seemingly on his neck. I think we're all just glad that he was okay and was somehow able to just carry on the match. But I thought it was a lot darker than I assumed it would be heading in. Because the tone's been kind of light. Everybody's been making fun of MJF and saying, you're going to have your head shaved soon. We had kind of a sports entertaining moment on the pre-show with Mick Foley coming along, speaking very well on the mic as always, and MJF interrupting him, giving him a low blow, and it all really seemed to be building up to his ultimate moment of comeuppance. And I thought that the bulk of at least the first half of the match was going to be MJF running scared, terrified of this stipulation coming true. It had a much darker tone. It had Darby taking these crazy risks. Of course, it's Darby Allin. We knew the match would reach that point eventually. I was just surprised that that was the dominant theme throughout the match, with Darby very much in danger the majority of the time. As he usually is. I just thought maybe this one would be different. Great performances by both men, of course. It's almost needless to say by this point when you're talking about MJF and Darby Allin. But then it becomes very apparent towards the end that the story they're telling is one that they have already been telling throughout Darby's short but very eventful world title reign. The fact that he is defending this belt at too reckless a pace. He's burning himself out in Darby Allin fashion. I don't think any of us would rather it any other way. And then at the end, when he locks in the Scorpion Deathlock and falls, unable to withstand this damage he's been doing to his body any longer, again, not just over the course of the match, but over the course of this whole reign, and MJF gets this grin on his face, I was expecting still Darby to find another burst of energy and turn the tables on him somehow. And that's not because I didn't think that Darby's reign wouldn't last very long. I was kind of prepared for it to be a short but eventful reign, probably suited him best, as we've seen in those TV defenses and everything. But I thought it would go at least one match longer. It's purely for the stipulation. I was so shocked that they teased this happening so heavily and then didn't follow through. I was very, very surprised. And again, I still can't work out whether I like it or not. It helps, of course, that it came at the end of what I think will generally be considered a very, very strong pay-per-view, a show of the year contender in all likelihood. But yeah, Darby didn't turn the tables one more time. MJF hit that middle rope tombstone piledriver, pinned him with a headlock takeover, a recurring theme of their feud over the years now, and won back the title. This answers quite a few questions, like will MJF still have hair by the end of the night, which he did. But it also leaves us with more questions as well. As the story of Darby burning himself out is kind of complete now. I thought maybe they'd have Darby win this one, MJF has his head shaved, but then wins a third match somehow, or like someone else beats Darby and then MJF beats them, and then by the time we get to the big Wembley show, as I think many of us were suspecting, you do go in with MJF as the heel champion against probably Will Ospreay. But they didn't do that, and they did take away that moment I guess many of us were expecting. And those questions we're left with going forwards, I guess, are one, is MJF the best possible opponent for Ospreay at Wembley, given that we've already seen an Ospreay-MJF Wembley match? Not in the main event, of course, and I'm sure this one will have more time dedicated to it, more fanfare and everything, if it is indeed Will Ospreay. And the other question is, where does Darby go? And that question has already partially been answered by the post-match shenanigans. If you haven't seen it, the post-match, of course, involved Kevin Knight running out to kind of chase MJF away, who was gloating over Darby as he was being loaded onto a stretcher. And then Kevin Knight gets on the top rope and frog splashes onto the stretcher, onto Darby, as he's being wheeled away, turning heel. Quite shocking. I know many people had already theorized that Kevin Knight was going to turn heel at some point, possibly to become like Swerve Strickland's henchman or something. Looks like he's striking out on his own instead, which I think is a very good idea, because he deserves to have that spotlight all to himself. He doesn't deserve to be somebody's underling. But I am quite shocked. I thought Kevin Knight was a very natural, very compelling babyface, and I also thought his rise was going to be slower. I'm not against it being quite fast, but this has definitely propelled him up the card instantly, without even wrestling a match on the show. He is now among the top heels of the company, for now at least anyway. We'll see how it goes. So I guess that's Darby's next feud. And I guess that possibly means that after this quite brief title reign, he's back in the role of elevating others, which he's brilliant at, because he bumps and sells like nobody else, maybe in World Wrestling at the moment. I'll be very intrigued to see how well this serves Kevin Knight, more of a natural babyface in terms of his moveset, his style of wrestling, all that sort of stuff, but somebody with such a high ceiling who can probably be a really, really good heel as well. We'll definitely find that out pretty fast. So yeah, a main event that was well wrestled, but one that I'm still, as you can tell, I'm still grappling with my own thoughts on it. Was this the best way to go? It was breaking a cardinal rule of wrestling booking, as I mentioned, but at the same time, it wasn't a disaster. It wasn't a disaster like the infamous stipulation of the exploding ring in AEW's past, which literally fizzled out before our eyes. No, this was something far more debatable. And again, I think it's because in lieu of telling one, perhaps more expected or more obvious story, they at least were very committed to telling another, the story of Darby's burnout. I don't know how much I liked it or disliked it. It might be one of those that we'll look back upon with a clearer vision after we see where everything goes in a few months' time. Now on to my thoughts regarding the rest of the night. We'll run through these in more chronological order now that I've got the main event and the big talking points, the match and the heel turn out of the way. So the opener of the main show was FTR defending their tag team titles against Cope and Cage with two stipulations. One, it was an I Quit match, and two, if Cope and Cage were to lose the match, of course, they could never team together again. Now I think one of those stipulations was the right call. The stipulation to have it be an I Quit match. Because, yeah, you might expect the babyfaces to always have an edge in an I Quit stipulation because they're brave babyfaces. They're not going to quit. But on the other hand, it's Cope and his neck issues and everything. And he's got a partner who obviously has a history and is still in gimmick, despite being a babyface, is still a bit of a dick and could just quit because he doesn't have the heart of Cope. So I thought that was a good stipulation. The stipulation I didn't agree with was the one that Cope and Cage could never again team together if they lost. Because I think we all knew that wasn't going to happen. But the match itself was a lot of fun. Just everything in there. Immediately raising questions regarding AEW's ordering of a card, of course. And if there's one major criticism that maybe could be aimed at the Double or Nothing card, you could say, and this is not unique to Double or Nothing, it's a common critique that you can have of an AEW pay-per-view, despite being so stuffed full, overstuffed sometimes, so stuffed full of unbelievable action, they maybe get the ordering wrong now and then. And this opening match had barbed wire, it had pile drivers, it had interference from Stokely and a returning Beth Phoenix as well. It had a flaming table spot. That's not me speaking for emphasis. It had a table on fire in the opener. Yeah, it made me a little bit worried for the rest of the show, which ultimately I don't think was too affected, although there were one or two matches where the crowd was maybe tired, but I don't know if that was necessarily the fault of this opener, because in a show with as many matches as AEW typically put on in a pay-per-view, I think that's always going to happen, unfortunately. As far as the match itself, I really struggle to know what kind of analysis to offer here. I think it speaks for itself, a lot of it. Cope and Cage, the story is told, like Cope and Cage have the toughness and the heart to fight through and become tag team champions and save their tag team as well in the process. With all the added fireworks of the weapons and Beth Phoenix's involvement and all that kind of stuff, and the flaming table, of course. But this basically was what we expected it to be. Maybe just not in the opener. I think moving forwards, the rumours or the speculation is probably going to be proven accurate, which is that we'll get some kind of FTR, Bucks, Copeland Cage TLC match, which is definitely something to look forward to. I, if nothing else, look forward to all the callbacks and the references that they're probably going to throw in. I think the Hardys are going to dress as the Hardys. I think the Bucks are going to dress as the Hardys, and I think that FTR are going to dress as the Dudleys. I think Copeland Cage are going to hopefully come out with the long hair and the kazoos, actually. Moving on to possibly my match of the night, or certainly one of them, the international title match between Kazuchika Okada and the challenger, Konosuke Takeshita. The big question I guess a lot of people had heading into this one, certainly in my Patreon chat, which we had a great time. Thank you very much, everybody, for getting involved. The big question in the chat was, is this going to be Kazuchika Okada in real motivated pay-per-view mode, or is this going to be Kazuchika Okada semi-phoning it in? And when Okada phones it in, he's still better than most wrestlers in the world, of course, but he's not like the Rainmaker. And we got our answer, and that answer was, after quite a patient opening stretch where that question was still in the balance, it became very apparent as the match rocketed through the gears that he'd in the words of the Miz's theme, he came to play. And interestingly, I don't think it felt particularly like an AEW pay-per-view match. I think this was a classic Okada New Japan final stretch sequence involving lots of reversals, lots of fighting spirit, finishes avoided, big kickouts, all that sort of stuff. And I know that a lot of modern day matches, not just in AEW, but across so many promotions, a lot of modern day big matches feature all those things that I've just mentioned. But I still think few wrestlers order them, pace them, and structure them quite like Okada can. Very interesting stuff with Don Callis at ringside as well. Obviously, in heelish fashion, not wanting his guys to go overboard and do too much exciting stuff to each other because he doesn't want them to hurt each other, and that affects his stable going forwards. Good logic there, good kayfabe psychology stuff from Don Callis and from whoever booked this match. So he stops Okada from hitting a tombstone on the outside, and Okada reluctantly kind of obeys him, but then Takeshita doesn't, hitting Okada with a brainbuster on the outside and sealing his fate, as it would turn out, and his exit from the Don Callis family at long last. And ultimately, as I say, after one of those thrilling Kazuchika Okada finishing stretches, we get, in my mind, the correct result. Konosuke Takeshita getting the big win and the international title as well to boot, and finally proving that he has risen above Okada as well in the pecking order of the Don Callis family. And then the family, very upset at Takeshita for, disobeying Don's wishes earlier, all seem like they're about to jump him. But then Kyle Fletcher makes a surprise appearance to a big pop, because he's been out injured, of course, he's been on the shelf. He makes a surprise appearance to back up his boy, to back up Konosuke Takeshita, with commentary emphasizing correctly the friendship between the two. But then, of course, Fletcher betrays Takeshita and turns on him and helps the Don Callis family beat him down and seals things with a belt shot to the head of Takeshita. That might sound like a predictable swerve, like an overly predictable one, but it wasn't. And the key here was the execution of it. Two key things in my mind. First, the acting of Kyle Fletcher. His facial expressions were really good. Seemingly very genuine moments, but he was like heartily congratulating Takeshita. It sounds stupid if you haven't watched it, because of course it's wrestling. They're all lying, they're all carnies, but it seemed a little bit genuine. Fletcher being like, well done mate, you've done it, you've won. Didn't seem over the top in a wrestlery sort of way to my eye. It seemed like a genuine happy moment, which made the betrayal all the more impactful. And the other thing that I thought made it really good, really well done in terms of the execution was from a production standpoint, waiting until the music played again and it seemed like it was the end of the segment and we're about to throw to the next link or the next match. And then the betrayal happens. That was really well done. Kind of reminded me of, and Triple H used to do that with NXT all the time. When NXT was... I miss that era. Also, what the hell? I thought Fletcher was meant to be out for a long time, but here he's hitting a brainbuster and stuff, moving around fine, seemingly. I hope he's back soon. That would be awesome. That would be a great bonus for AEW's roster. But obviously I don't want them to rush him back or anything. But he looked pretty good in there. Next up, the only match in the women's Owen Hart tournament on the show, which was meant to be Willow Nightingale's match, but sadly she is now injured. So it was replaced by another match in the tournament bracket between Athena and Mina Shirakawa. Now, you could say that this one was maybe a bit of a step down in terms of the intensity of the action, but after those two opening matches, I think that's probably understandable. If they'd both gone out there all guns blazing, then it might have become overkill. So I think they paced this one quite well. Instead, it was a much more simple story told in the match. The story of Athena's leg being sold heavily and well done by Athena throughout the match, and by Mina targeting that, trying to set up the leg for the figure 4 leg lock. And I think that was very wise. I think that turned the match from maybe a bit of a predictable underdog versus favourite story into something with a little bit more uncertainty. Athena started selling that leg from very, very early on in the match, introducing the possibility of an upset, which ultimately didn't come true, and we got maybe the expected result of Athena winning. But I liked that it introduced that little bit of uncertainty, and I thought it served the match well. But we are left with quite compelling questions going forwards in the tournament setting in which this match took place. How will that leg hold up in the next round for Athena against Suri? Or against Sky Blue, if she beats Suri in the first round? It's gonna be Suri. What was after that? Jon Moxley versus Kyle O'Reilly for the Continental title. A very intriguing setup, with Kyle O'Reilly going 20 minutes against Moxley to secure this title shot. Now, you'd expect that the challenger would therefore be hanging on at the end of the match, desperate not to lose and give up their title shot. But if you watch the TV match, you'll know that trope was subverted, with Kyle being the one in control and Moxley desperately not tapping out to lose the match there and then. And that made a lot of sense. I thought that really worked as a setup to this match because, of course, if we know our recent AEW history, we'll know that Kyle O'Reilly has had Moxley's number like a lot, multiple times in recent memory. And I think this was the first match where the crowd were noticeably maybe a little bit quiet at times. I couldn't work out whether that was the fault of, again, that big opener and everything happening in the first match or two matches, or whether it was just the inevitability that comes with having quite a slower paced technical match anywhere but the opener of the card. Also, another criticism that I thought was worth mentioning was that it was another match that featured quite a lot of leg work straight after Athena versus Mina Shirakawa, which was entirely centered around leg work. So that was a bit of a slip up again from AEW in terms of the ordering of matches. I liked this match. I really did. I thought it really grew into itself as the action progressed between two excellent wrestlers at having this type of match. But another negative that I do have to mention, and I really don't want to, unfortunately, was JR on commentary. This was his match. He only obviously he's got a limited role now. He's had his health issues, some of them very recent and everything, and I don't think this was even his fault. He is not to blame here, but it really took away from the match, in my opinion. He just didn't really know the story of the match he was watching. He was emphasizing how young O'Reilly is, who is in his late 30s, by the way. He was emphasizing that this is the biggest match of young O'Reilly's life, and if this kid can just somehow pull out a win against the bigger, more experienced Jon Moxley, then maybe this is the biggest win he'll ever have. No, like, that's exactly not the story they were telling. And he neglected to mention, I don't think he knew, that O'Reilly had multiple wins over Moxley in the past, which like everybody else watching knew. And most disappointingly, I think at several points, JR also had trouble recalling Kyle O'Reilly's name. It's not his fault. Again, I want to really stress that. This isn't JR's fault. We all know the health struggles he's been through. We know that he's just getting older as well. But I think the blame has to just lie with AEW in general. Because this, unfortunately, did take me out of what was meant to be a very intricate and patient match. And it just totally distracted me from the action at several points. It's a shame that I have to say that, because this was a very intelligent match in terms of its grappling exchanges and its structure overall. Definitely a match worthy of its place on the card, despite being a very late addition. Moxley gets the very hard-fought submission victory, shakes Kyle's hand very sportingly afterwards as well, and JR says, incorrectly, and again it's not his fault, but he says, oh, we've got a new champion. You know, don't put him out there. It's not his fault, but just don't give him this match at least. Give him one with people he's more familiar with. Next up, the men's Owen Hart tournament match, one of two on the night, in fact. Will Ospreay versus Samoa Joe, a match that I would have liked to have seen time shaved off several other candidates on this show, mainly the Stadium Stampede match, which I will get to in a short while. But yeah, I would have happily had a little bit of time taken from quite a lot of other matches to give them, Ospreay and Joe, Will Ospreay and Samoa Joe, give them 20 minutes, even more. Nobody would have complained. This match had a very distinctive start with Ospreay hitting an instant Os cutter to jumpstart the action, and then when Joe finally hits his first offensive maneuver and takes control, I love the fact that he complains to the referee. Because it wasn't fair. The bell had not sounded, and Ospreay's hitting him with an Os cutter out of nowhere, which is great and exciting if, from our point of view, from the audience's point of view, wanting the babyface to win. But obviously the heels should be aggrieved at that. And a lot of them wouldn't have bothered to show that, but Joe did. And he's such a pro and so experienced and so amazing. So obviously he remembered. I've seen criticism online of this Ospreay training with the Death Riders storyline. People seem to, and they've got a point, but people seem quite annoyed that it doesn't really seem to have changed Ospreay drastically. Like, he still goes for high-flying maneuvers. He's not as radically overhauled his game as maybe this storyline would suggest. But I think the storyline's more about changing his attitude in the ring from a character point of view rather than the actual moves he's doing. And the finish demonstrated that as well. After, again, a match that felt fully fleshed out enough, certainly, but one that I would have loved to have seen go like a third longer, even. But the finish really demonstrated this change in attitude with Ospreay hitting the hidden blade, Joe kicking out pretty instantly, but then Ospreay not panicking, not getting emotional, just becoming more cold and more clinical, hitting a second hidden blade to the back of Joe's head this time and picking up the win. The expected win, because I think most of us expect Ospreay to not only beat Joe here, but to win the whole overall tournament and then progress to Wembley. But it was still, I found it a very compelling match nonetheless. Lots of little things peppered in that I really like to see as well, like Joe doing that classic walkaway spot, but like off a second Oscutter attempt, getting revenge for that opening ambush by Ospreay at the bell, and also the Styles Clash that Ospreay hit on Joe. And Excalibur making a really good call on commentary. So I think it was Excalibur, one of the commentators saying like, Joe's probably getting flashbacks to a couple of decades ago, referencing his feud with AJ Styles in TNA. Yeah, just all really good stuff. And I preferred it to the other men's Owen Hart tournament match, but not by a great distance or anything, because I think the other one was still very good as well. Bandido versus Swerve Strickland. In a little bit of a similar way to Okada versus Takeshita, this one felt like the back half of the match was where all the exciting stuff was kept, which is not necessarily a criticism. That's what like old school wrestling logic would dictate you do. You build to a crescendo. And the turning point was, if you've seen the match, you'll know exactly which spot I'm talking about, that absurd house call kick when Bandido had boosted Swerve up, but then Swerve balanced on Bandido's shoulders and hit the house call off one leg while stood on top of his opponent. That's insanity. It was followed shortly after by another crazy spot, a reverse Rana off the apron to the floor. Back in the ring, Bandido hits the 21-plex, but can't complete the pinfall because Swerve has deliberately targeted his neck up to that point, so Bandido can't complete the bridge on the German suplex part of the move. Very nice stuff. And the finish was really cool. The 21-plex again, this time countered with Swerve catching Bandido. It's one of those sequences where you're like, oh yeah, with these two opponents matched up and their two movesets, of course they went with this counter. It was like the perfect way they could have gone, with Swerve catching Bandido mid-21-plex attempt in perfect vertebreaker position, essentially, hitting the vertebreaker, and that leads him on the road to victory. Like the Ospreay-Joe match, I think you could say this one had a predictable winner. I think even though Bandido is still the Ring of Honor World Champion, in AEW, he's not quite booked as strong as he, and not as strong as Swerve, certainly, and especially with Swerve having turned heel not that long ago still, I think we all knew that Swerve was going to win this one. The way the brackets are set up, I believe that it also possibly leads to a Swerve versus Ospreay final if they both win all their matches, and that looks like a sensible way to go. As I mentioned, between this one and the previous one, I think I preferred Ospreay-Joe, but this match, my big takeaway from Swerve Bandido is that it was a serious reminder of Swerve's quality. This was a great performance from him, especially when taking moves in his bumping and his selling of Bandido's offense. I thought he not only made himself look great, which Swerve always does, but in this match in particular, I felt like Swerve really tried to enhance his opponent too, and I think he succeeded. Next up, the women's four-way match for the women's world title, Tekla defending against Hikaru Shida, Jamie Hayter, and Chris Statlander as well. This was a good match, definitely. I think all four wrestlers did well. I think, again, the issue here was maybe the level of crowd excitement relative to a lot of the other matches on the card where the crowd were quite red hot. In this one, they were a little bit more tired. And again, I'm not certain if this had much to do with its position on the card. And that's a criticism that I often think does apply to AEW Women's World title matches. I think they're shoved in towards the end of the show, but often between or just before some of like the best built matches on the whole thing, and everyone's kind of waiting for it to be over, which is very, very unfortunate, and I do feel bad for a lot of the women in that division when it happens. This one I don't think was necessarily a clear-cut example of that, but I do think a criticism applies even more, and I think that AEW would do very well to remember, and I'm not the first person to make this point, it's been made very accurately countless times before, not just in regards to AEW, women's wrestling on the whole, But I think AEW would especially do very well to remember that you can build a feud between women on your show and there doesn't need to be a title involved. And you can dedicate time and good storytelling to a women's feud on your show and have it on the pay-per-view rather than like throw more women in there and make it a multi-person match. I'd rather see a hot feud with high stakes, not even necessarily a title, but a hot feud with a lot of hatred behind it or whatever, and throw that on your show. And I think that would do better than maybe a build like this one. Case in point, this match, the main story of it was the breakdown of Shida and Statlander's friendship. Very, very central to this match, but something I think could definitely have been built more on TV, or at least given more time. Have more time dedicated to it. Because I'm fine with that story itself. I would have just liked to have seen that explored a bit more. Especially because it played directly into the finish here, with tensions escalating between Shida and Statlander throughout the match, and then Shida costing Statlander the win, breaking up a pinfall with a kendo stick shot to the back, and that led to Tekla being able to scoop the victory and escape with her title reign intact. Again, good performances from all four women. I think Jamie Hayter was on especially good form here. Tekla, of course, brought that charisma that she brings to every title defense of hers. Can't fault her at all. Everybody was good in the match. I just think they deserved a much better build. And if the trade-off there is having less women in these matches, which is very unfortunate, but having less women so that we can dedicate better storytelling and more time to just a one-on-one feud. Again, it doesn't even need to be for a belt, but we can have more than one of these type of matches in your women's division on a pay-per-view. I think that's probably a worthwhile trade-off and one that AEW should try and make more in the future. Like, you could have had Tekla defend her belt against one of these women, and you could have had the other two in a match completely separate. And I think that would be a more sensible way to go. I guess that's a more concise illustration of what I'm trying to say here. The second last match of the night, Stadium Stampede. The babyface team of Jericho, Jack Perry, the Bucks, Kenny Omega, and the Hurt Syndicate, that makes 7, I think, taking on Ricochet, the Gates of Agony, Andrade, Mark Davis, David Finlay, and Clark Connors. I was going to say at the start, I was like, oh, this is, when I saw the setup and I saw the way they all came out and the big old brawl to start things off and the fact that it seemed to be largely taking place in the arena itself, I was like, oh, this is way more of a serious kind of Anarchy in the Arena match, more about chaos and carnage rather than a bit more of a stylized, a bit more silly and comedic match like Stadium Stampede typically tends to be. And even though this was called Stadium Stampede, I thought basically we were getting an Anarchy in the Arena match instead. And I was pleased about that at first, but then everything changed and it became apparent that no, this was definitely more towards the Stadium Stampede part of the scale, the sillier, more comedic side, than the all-out anarchy of Anarchy in the Arena. But to my own surprise, I maybe don't think that was necessarily a bad thing, because on a show where we had a lot of action, as most AEW pay-per-views give us, all of them in fact, I think maybe this was quite a welcome change of tone. It was comedic, it was silly, there was ludicrous cameos from many, many different people. Kind of reminded me of the Money in the Bank ladder match in Titan Towers during lockdown. The amount of cameos we had from Leo Rush, who popped up backstage in his quite new gimmick to reunite with Bobby Lashley and help him in a brawl. We had indie wrestler Tommy Invincible. Satnam Singh was involved. There was a food fight. There was a lot going on. Luchasaurus disguising himself as one of Andrade's ringside ladies. That was genuinely a funny moment. Luther appearing to give Jericho a huge tennis racket to use as a weapon. There was so much going on, both in the arena and backstage. There were some noteworthy non-comedic moments too, most notably probably Toa Leona hitting a Samoan drop on not one, not two, 3 opponents at once. And it was nice to see Shelton Benjamin rolling back the years with a big dive to the outside too, proving that he very much still has it in that department. So yeah, the reason I think this was maybe quite a welcome change of tone, even though it wasn't the type of match I personally enjoy the most, I think that, especially on a show with like FTR versus Cope and Cage, which had a serious edge, but also, literally a serious edge, but also all the weapons and all the spots and all the crazy stuff you could think of, it would feel like we were just doing that again, but with more people involved. So the more I thought about it, the more I thought, maybe it's good that they actually held off from doing that here. But that does not take away from my overall criticism of this match, because this went long, so long. And like I said about Ospreay Joe, but like you could say about quite a few different matches on this card, I would have definitely welcomed this match being, I don't know how long it went, you could definitely have knocked maybe even like a half of its run time off. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but quite a lot of it and dispersed it about the rest of the show. And I wouldn't have complained about that at all. But still, it was what we expected it to be. The babyfaces won, as they should have. Jericho did a nice tribute to Sabu afterwards, hitting a spot through an empty table and pointing at the sky. That was lovely to see. My favourite part was actually backstage, where Jericho used like a tennis ball launcher, but it was going into business for itself, firing indiscriminately, even long after he'd stopped touching it or operating it. It was terrifying. It was almost like a Jackass sketch. These damn local talents getting a cameo spot on a pay-per-view and trying to go into business for themselves. Very unprofessional. I don't think the tennis ball launcher will be getting invited back anytime soon. And then the main event, which I've already talked about at the top of this video. On the whole, I think Double or Nothing was a massive success. My main takeaway, once again, is that I am shocked that they did not follow through with that stipulation. I'm not shocked to see MJF hold that belt again. I just didn't think it would be at this show with his hair on the line. I can't believe they didn't do it. And again, it seems to break that cardinal rule, but they kind of worked their way around it. It's not the way I would have done it, but it's not the end of the world either. And he might put his hair on the line again in future, but I genuinely don't think he wants to. Fair enough. Thank you very much for watching this review. I've been Jack the Jobber. Like this video, please, if you wouldn't mind. It does help, boost it in the eyes of YouTube and all that kind of stuff. And let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'd be very keen to hear what people think of what I think was generally a very good show. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.